Who is the Kennewick Man? Kennewick Man is a name given to the remains of an ancient human found along a river in Kennewick, Washington. It was more than 9,000 years old, which determined that the age of the skeleton was between 9,200 and 9,400 years old, making the skeleton one of the oldest and most complete ever found in North America. Radiocarbon dating revealed Kennewick Man died more than 9,000 years ago around the age of 40. His bones were then given to forensic anthropologist James Chatters for evaluation. Chatters reconstructed the skeleton, which was 80 to 90% complete. He determined that it was from a man who was probably 5 feet 9 or 10 inches taller than most people of his time, and about 40 to 50 years when he died, weighed roughly around 163 pounds, and was right-handed and muscular. He was taller and thinner than most of the ancient Native Americans, and the back of his skull was not flattened from a crater board as they commonly observed in skeletons of ancient Native Americans. Using computerized tomography, Chatters determined that the spear point was serrated and leaf-shaped and typical of the type of spears used between 8,500 and 4,500 years ago. Chatters theorized that the skeleton was a European pioneer who had been attacked by a native people using Stone Age weapons or from an ancient human. This concludes to the question, who is the rightful owner of the Kennewick Man? This leads to determine the existence of the first Native American people. The history of the Native Americans is captivating and in many ways tragic. We now know that it is a single population of modern humans spread from the southern Siberia toward the Bering Land Bridge as early as 30,000 years ago, and further spread from Beringia to the American after 16,500 years ago. From archaeology, we know that the first Americans appeared south of the Canadian ice sheets by 15,000 years ago, 2,000 years before the emergence and the spread of Clovis. Theory argues that humans used boats to navigate along the coast of Siberia and across the Americas. They had slowly migrated across the land and southward into Mexico and beyond. They migrated to all regions of the land and were formed into many different tribes or nations. These were people who adapted well to their particular regions and made intelligent use of all natural resources available. They became skill hunters, farmed crops such as corn, and built homes with whatever available resources their land provided. Studies suggested that the earliest late Pleistocene ancestor of Native Americans entered the Americas in a single wave from a single source population. Furthermore, they estimate that this group migrated from Siberia to the Americas no earlier than 23,000 years ago, during the harsh and cold last glacial maximum, and after no more than 8,000 years of isolation from the ancestral Siberian population. Many archaeologists believe that the Clovis points define the earliest existence of the Americas by modern human groups. The formerly leading Clovis first model proposes that a small migration of hunters armed with thrusting spears entered the Americas from Siberia around 11,500 years ago. The Clovis lived in the middle of an ice age, where the sea levels were lowered because so much water was frozen solid as a result. Land that's now under water was revealed. The Clovis scavenged for plants and hunted animals for food. The evidence reflected in the Kennewick materials is further proof that race is not what we think it is. Scientists argue that there is no evidence relating any of today's tribes to the skeleton. It is said that Kennewick's man's skull, which is large and narrow with a protrusive face, doesn't look like the skulls of later Native Americans. Anthropologist Boas disagreed with the biological features to justify racial differences, yet he proved that the physical features are a result of development in one's environment, not indication of human species. Boas believed that anthropologists should understand each culture through its own lens and judge it given to its own social standard. Boas looked precisely at the relationship between physical type and physical environment. In the 19th century, one idea that Boas proposed was racial distinction based on skull and features. The human skull was used as a way to justify the idea of races. Boas confirmed his revolutionary conclusion. Head form, which has always been considered one of the most stable and permanent characteristics of human races, undergo far-reaching changes coinciding with the transfer of the people from Europeans to American soil. Race examines relevant crucial importance of individuals in the development of history. The idea of race is based on cultural rather than biological component. Race depends mostly on the experience and prejudices of the observer. In prehistoric times, Caucasians have longer, more angular faces with beakier noses. Modern Magnolids have rounder skulls and smaller noses. There are distinctive differences in cranial between recent groups such as European, African, and Asian. In relation to the controversy of the Kennewick man, was race an important aspect which identified the human skull found in the shallow water? Anthropologists describe Kennewick man traits as a European descent with a long, narrow face, with narrow cheekbones and a protruding upper jaw. Yet further evidence by showing that, contrary to what the skull measurements indicated, Kennewick man is most closely related to modern Native Americans. The evidence reflected in the Kennewick material is further proof that race is not what we think it is. Scientists argue that there is no evidence relating any of today's tribes to the skeleton. It is said that Kennewick man's skull, which is large and narrow with a protrusive face, doesn't look like the skull of later Native Americans. The relationship between the U.S. government and American Indian tribes during the 19th century was implacable. Indians have possessed some valuable reservation land and resources over which the white Americans have kept their eyes on. Much of this was lost. White Americans headed by the federal government were the bad guys, cheating Indians out of their land and resources. Native Americans were the good guys, attempting to maintain a traditional way of life, much more in harmony with nature and the environment, but powerless to defend their territory. There is no doubt that Native Americans suffered enormously at the hands of white Americans, nor were Indians simply passive victims of white American actions. The Indian Reorganization Act promoted a more positive approach to the issues facing the tribes. Primarily, it ended the allocation of tribal lands and extended the period for existing shares of the tribal lands. It recognized tribal governments and encouraged tribes to adopt constitution. Native American history in the 19th century was much more than a simple story of good and evil, and it raises important questions about the status of Native Americans in modern U.S. society. Given this historical evidence, this concludes that the Native American tribes are the rightful owners of the Kennewick man.